Hello, good afternoon, good morning, and I'd like to thank you for joining us in this month's Data Ninja Data Fiesta, and this is a program that has been um, created to enable us to learn more when it comes to data science, data analysis, etc. So, a brief introduction of myself. My name is Oluwaseyi Oluwawumiju. I am a Microsoft certified trainer. I'm one of the MVP in Nigeria, and also I'm the regional lead when it comes to the MCT trainers in Nigeria. I've been consulting for a while, and I have been a trainer, and also I author some books, and I also speak internationally. Now, today's people that have made this happen. Shout out to our partners that have allowed this program to be able to be real, realistic, and accessible. We're thanking Microsoft. We're also thanking Gyri Computer and Enterprise DNA. Now, let's look at what we're going to look at this afternoon, this morning, or this evening, or this night, depending on where you're calling from. We're going to go into introduction of machine learning in general, and we're going to look at the automated area of machine learning. Why do we need to automate it? What's the essence of automation? Now, we know machine learning is a way by which you create model. Now, those models are pipelined into different activity through an experiment. And each of these experiments is to create a business direction, especially when it comes to processes, business activity, and this activity will now be championing the way you look at your business angle from the programming language. And machine learning gives us an ability to create such experiment and such experiment iteration of each of these experiments in different output, and this output are categorized into percentage. Now, what is automated process? Automated process is a way by which you combine all this process in a very sequential process that enable this to be real and ensure your business continuity without wasting time and without consuming more of your resources, and ensuring you are meeting your target because of different iteration you have, and different output will give you a targeted percentage and precise direction in what your model will look like. And we're going to take a demo, and finally I give room for question and answer, and we'll summarize our whole activity. Now let's quickly go into the building block that actually enable data science projects. And one of the building block that is very essential is your data source. Now, where you get your data, because your data signify the preliminaries, the building, the foundation to every model you create. Then your data also give you initial parameters, variables that you can use to iterate what you want and how your model need to be done. Now, after you have got your data, the next step you need to do is to ensure that you build and train those models. Now, training those models can be done in two ways. It can either be a classical way where you have normal data, very small data, or a mid-range data, and you inject it into your model, iterate it with different output and parameters, and ensure your output gives you a direction to which your model will look like. Or you can use a deep learning system where you have a system that integrates into deep neurological network, where you can have precise injection, parameters, manipulation, and ensure that each of these data give you an output that can give you a guide to where and what you are precisely looking at. Then after you have done that, you now need to have what we call a tuning of your parameter. Tuning of your parameter is like an experiment which you do in your lab. You ensure you use different variables to give you an inference of what that particular experiment is likely to give you. Now, once you have done that, you now bring this data this hypothesis that you have, this parameter you have already put down or pegged down to be your variables, and ensure it into an experiment that is pipelined into different activity. Now, after you have done the pipeline, you have been able to look at the percentage of the result you have, you now deploy it, and with the infusion of DevOps operation into AI, especially machine learning model, you are able to create a system that gives you a continuous process without affecting your output, affecting your customer view and adoption of your model. Now, these are the specific area by which you can build a machine learning journey with. Now, let's look at how it's done on Azure. Azure is Microsoft's own cloud provision that enable you to have, because Azure is standing out as one of the best cloud provider all over the world. The adoption rate has been high. Now, when we look at machine learning as a specific service on Azure, you can contain it into 5 different frameworks. The first one is that the domain-specific predefined model that we have through vision, speech, language, and search that lie closely on Azure provision. Then we have other things like when you talk of data science tool that you can use to make this work. One of them is Jupyter, that is very familiar with us. Another one is Visual Studio, and also command line that can help you to simplify your model, create algorithms that can easily be manipulated and used to create parameters and parentheses that you could easily iterate in making your model and your pipeline efficient. Now, other things we need to make this work is to create what we call a flow, deep learning flow, or we call it machine learning flow. To build that kind of framework, you can use applications that runs on Azure like Python, Python Touch, TensorFlow, and also Onyx. Then when you come to productivity of your services, you need also injection of powerful data, a system that can create your injection very, very smooth and very, very efficient, where your optimization can be easily captured by the model, and the data injection can easily be modified at the cost of the production of your model or your experiment. And one of those things that Azure can give you is the Azure Databricks, and also Azure Machine Learning and Machine Learning VM, which are VM you can. Now, Azure is a platform built on gigantic computing power. And because of that, the powerful hardware enable you to use Azure Machine Learning to achieve your goal. Now, knowing that, let's now sum up how Azure works, especially when it comes to machine learning. We have a lot of service that is built on cloud, and you can also add what we call the Python view. Now, Azure Machine Learning has been scoped into 2 different views. We have the one that have little or no programming language advantage or knowledge, and those that are used to programming language like Python. Now, with the machine learning studio, you can only do certain injection of data, but with the Python, you can have large enterprise data bricks injected into your system to create a very robust and high efficient algorithm. Now, because of that, mashing these 2 down under Azure Machine Learning Service, you can have the one you have on cloud service with the machine learning, prepare the data, build a model, and train them. And also you can manage those models by tracking those experiences and having what we call a deep dive into the system by adding your Azure cloud service with Azure Python SDK. Now, we are moving closer to when we come to automation. Now, we know that for each of your ituration, for each of your algorithm and parameter you create, you have to modularize it. Now, I use modularization because you keep changing the parameters, and each time you change the parameter, you get a different output, and each time you get a different output, it move you closer to perfection or tell you to do more modification along the line. And because of that, this will take time, this will consume your resources. And because it takes a lot of time to be able to create each of these itineration and each of this model and pipeline, it is now essential to have a system that when you come from the future, you can actually create different future, develop different algorithms, and be able to alternate this parameter. And eventually you'll be having several percentage from 20%, from 15 to 10 to 25, until you get to the near perfect percentage. That's 95%. And because of that, a system is required. A system that can bring all your activity into a system, into a process, into a flow that can easily move from one flow to another and ensure that you create a better algorithm and a perfect near system. And that brings us to the topic of the automated machine learning. Automated machine learning is a learning system that is created to ensure that your environment is created to enable your users to have access to your environment, access to your model, and increase efficiency without wasting time. Now, in production, one area that automated machine learning gives you an advantage is when you are producing your services. It empowers you to develop it among yourself and with your team. And also, in terms of infrastructure, whether you are doing a general deep learning service, the end series, or you are doing a general purpose machine learning, the system is adopted with powerful infrastructure. I'm talking of Azure to enable you to achieve what you want to achieve with time. Now, the infusion of DevOps into the system ensure you preparing your environment properly, preparing your data, ensuring that structure, injecting those data into your experiment, and it simplifies the way you deploy it. Now, automated machine learning in general is therefore a system by which you create an algorithm that can easily manipulate your hyper parameters in a very precise and specific fashion, and allow you to do that without actually having human intervention. So eventually, what I'm saying now, this afternoon, this morning, or this evening, is that the automated machine learning enable you to democratize your AI automated system, and that infusing the flow from the raw data to implementing of your data, cleaning those data, processing those data, modifying those data, and modeling it with various features, and ensuring that each of these parameters are optimized to give you a very precise, optimized, and efficient model valuation. Now, in this now, it brings me to how do I use automated machine learning? There are two ways I can use it. One, if I'm a code-driven person, I'm a programmer, a software developer that knows how to use Python, I can deploy it by using a Python SDK. And I can also, if I'm the first one, allow you to have large data, increased data, enterprise data that can be injected into your model. Why, if I want a small model for staging process, I can use the limited one that does not really need high level of code experience. I can use machine learning model, Learning Studio. So I can use these two systems. Now, when we are using automatic machine learning environment, we are using it in 4 cardinal areas. 1, for classification, for regression, for forecasting, and computing vision, and NLP. Now, the question here for this particular track and this particular time, I'm going to segment myself into just the forecasting. We're not going to look at classification, regression. I wish the time would be for me. I also want to dive into computer vision, where you can see how you can use that to create computer vision and begin to classify people by type, by name, and by position or location. But let's go right into what ultimate benefit from this kind of experimenting. It saves time, it allows agility in terms of your production, and it addresses any gap, especially for those that don't have precise machine learning knowledge or code-driven knowledge, to be able to still run the same algorithm and same model with machine learning environment provided by Microsoft. Now, an experiment was created by a particular company, the Olison experiment on parameter. It fluctuated about 165 classification of data and using different classification algorithm. Now, what was it trying to prove? Especially to create classification in terms of accuracy, ensure he has improvement in terms when you classify his model, and to bring about a tuning that can ensure. Now, when they use the normal data environment, that using machine learning environment, they found out that they had so many bad outputs, and they saw that they were using more of their resources and the time was being consumed. Now, when they shifted over by using auto machine learning, they saw it was smoother, it was easier, and the time was faster. Now, let's quickly go to our demo. Now, pardon me, I'll be moving to my lab, and I'll be putting out my environment. Now, the first thing you have to know is that for you to be able to use Azure machine learning, you need to have subscription, and those subscription need to be what? To be either you use the sponsor one, or you use the one that you get through a 100 days 100 days utilization. So I'm going to change my, I'm going to where my demo is. I can see, you guys can see my demo. Now, as I said earlier, the first thing we need to do is to ensure that we have a subscription. Now, subscription gives you the variety of being able to use all Azure services, and those Azure services are included here, and those services enable you to be able to use all your Azure services as you want. Now, another way you can get to the machine learning is to go to the ML machine learning environment, that is machine learning dots, and it will ask you to create what we call you have to create your own workspace. That's the first thing you need to do. You create your own workspace. And how do you create your own workspace? You create your own workspace by creating it. You see the button. Once you log into it, you see by the extreme right, you see workspace and the cursor you are going to use. Then you have other information here, building AI solution, to this with SDK and the rest. But what we want to do is to ensure that we create a workspace. But you find out that because I created my subscription tied to my Azure portal, there's an issue here. It's telling me that I should create a subscription. What it means is that while I'm trying to get my subscription, I could have mapped it via the Machine Learning Studio, but that does not stop us. All we need to do is to do the other way by going to the Azure portal, you log in, and by default, your subscription will be already there on Azure portal, and you can easily go into the machine learning and create what you want. So the first thing you need to do is to create a workspace. Now, a workspace is where you have. So under Azure itself, when you go to Azure portal, you can go find your Azure machine learning. From Azure machine learning, it brings you to where you can create your workspace. Now, the workspace will require you to have what we call a resource group. You can create a new one. Then you have to give it a name, class demo 2, and it creates what we call a storage account for you, You create your secret environment for your bot where you have your number. Then it also creates what we call an application inside to be able to have feedback. Then container registry if you are going to use, but I'm not going to use a container here. So once that is established, I can create my workspace. Now my workspace is created. Now after your workspace is created, the next thing you need to do now is to start developing your automated environment. Now, it's so smooth, so easy for Azure. It's enable you to have an advantage that is beyond just what you know, but you have an environment that is already created for you that you can easily manipulate to have what you want. So once you have that, the next thing you need to have is to be able to develop your Azure AI AL environment, and that is once the environment is created, it's still creating it. You can see now everything is created. You can see okay, but it has not finished the deployment. Let's wait for the deployment. Take a little while. Once that is done, you now go right into your automated environment and start creating your parameter, and that also help you to be able to see your environment and be able to deploy it. Now we are done. Now what I always do is to pin it to my dashboard and call it one name. Let me move this to the other side, pin it. So I still go to my, I already pin it. Let me go to my resource. Now this is my environment. Now you can see it tells me my resource group, my location, my subscription ID, my studio. You can see the site, my vault, and where I can get my insight. Now the next thing we need to do is to be able to go into that studio and start to run my machine learning environment. Now you see here, launch studio. You have created it on Azure, but you need to launch the studio. It takes you right into your studio. Now in your studio, it's enable you to see all your parameter when it comes to the machine learning. So let's look at our studio. Let's look at our studio and see from there how we can automated machine learning. So now once we have that, you can see you can create a new one, but we are going to automated machine learning because we are not really using it. We are trying to deploy the automatic machine learning environment. Now you just click on the automatic machine learning, and once you do that, it asks you to create a new machine learning, and creating it ensure that you have your environment and injecting. So let's create a new ML. Now under a create a new job, you have to create a new data set, which is now the data set now is where you inject your data. Now you either inject it via a local file, or if you have a data store, if you have it on the web, or if you can open it on a data set. So for this I have a data that I have already created. Now under here, under my basic information, I need to give it a name. Now let me just call it class demo 2. The same name. Then I allow it to be on the tabular. Then I can describe it. What do I say? My model class training. Now once I've described it, I move to the next stage. Now I need to bring this data in. Now, another thing that is essential is for you to create what we call a store. Now we know we have already store created. You can choose any of this, or you create a new one, then you browse to where those file is. I have a file somewhere. Where is it? I think I have a file. Download, no. Okay. Where did I keep this file? Okay. Let me just locate my file. So let's trace it back. Okay. I'll download it. Then let me check it again and see on my download page, browse to the file, just go straight to download. That's it. This is the, yeah, and it's about 52 kg. And I now need to set whether I need data validation. Do I really need to validate it? Now just leave it the way it looks like so that I can move to next. Now, under data, it helped me to check the status, ensure that it prepare my data set. Now, during the data set, it tried to help me to create and view the way I want to view my data. In terms of the format, I'll leave it at delimited because it's an SSV file. I make it comma, I encode it under UTF. Then under the column heading, I want it to only have only the first file. I only want the first file that has the header, so I allow it. Skipping row, leave it as none. Then it helped me. You can see here the data is being prepared for me. When you scroll down, is a CTN file with the category there. So the next thing is to look at the schema. Now the schema is where you write what you want. For example, allow the CTN to allow it, and I leave the property as the way it is, and I click next. Now I now need to set some parameter right. Now this is where allow the parts to be. Now if you go down, the CTN is an integer, allow it. Then I also look at the basic information that is there. I confirm everything that is required, and you can see the path. Now for the path, you ignore that. You just allow it to be the way it is. We don't change anything. We don't include anything. We click next. Now it gives me a confirmation of what I want. Then I create the particular file. Now this helped me to select, create, and ensure that everything is done according to what I want. Now the next step is for me is to create the job. Now in creating the job, I need to allow, after the data set has been created, it takes me to how to configure the job. Now configuring the job is a way by which I want to create the experiment name, ensure that the data set is properly done, and the rest. So I choose this data set. I just it's supposed to populate it, refresh it. Yeah, that's it. Now I choose it, I click next. Now it takes me to the job creation. Now in job creation, I need to enter a name for it. I can say class demo as said earlier. Now the targeted column, we said we should leave it as CTN, integer, which is what we are trying to experiment. In terms of the computer cluster, let's leave it as a cluster. And in selecting new target, let's allow it to select a machine learning cluster. Now, under machine learning cluster, I give you the virtual machine. I use it. I leave it as dedicated. In terms of the virtual machine type, let me use the CPU, central processing. In terms of the virtual machine, let's just use the standard V2 because of our standard DS12 V2. Let's look for 12. DS12V2. Okay, because I've used it earlier, let me just use the V1 standard and click next. Now, the next, it requires you to have populate it with the name you want. So let's call it bike compute 2, because I've done it earlier. Now the maximum can be between 1 and 0. So let me leave it at 1 and the minimum to be 6. Let me use 6. Okay, you can only give me 1 and 3, but we have a module that will give you. So we leave it at 120, and in advanced setting, we just leave every setting that is there the way it is. So I click create. Now it creates the cluster for me. Now once it creates the cluster, I'll be able to now go into the job to ensure that I finish my job setting, and it can now move to trying to focus on what I want on the particular bike. The essence of the model is to be able to see which of the season is more applicable, more appealing in terms of rentage of bike. Now we have injected some data, and those data we have seen that we can actually use to experiment, giving different iteration to ensure that the model gives us a pipeline from this experiment that can focus the best way by which we can have that. So we click next. So let's select the data cluster now, which we have created. Now we click next on that. Now when you click on next, the next thing is it check in terms of how you want it, in terms of timing, in terms of how you want those tasks to be done. Primarily in terms of the metric you want, how you want it to be enabled, and the rest. Now, the first thing we need to do is to ensure we have the task type. Now, under the task type, we allow it to be dates as a column. Then we leave the time series as auto-detect. In terms of frequency, let's keep it to 4, so that it can allow 4 iteration to every of the model. Then in terms of focusing on the horizontal, we allow it also to have 14 focus, and we keep this frequency to auto detect, and time series identifier, we leave it as blank. In order to keep its history, we allow the frequency to detect it, and we just the horizontal will make it at 14, so that it can allow you to have that. So under in terms of the preview of the language, primary, we allow the you can allow different of this version, whether you want it on natural processing or computing review. Now, those are additional things you can create. Now, let's go to next. So if you are not creating any additional thing, you can actually create additional thing in terms of looking at normalization, how you want the normalization to be done. If you have a particular model you want to block, and that will help you to root out. So for this one, let's allow it to be normalized roots, means square root, error. Let's enable the best model. Let's allow it to be there. In terms of the block algorithm, let's use extreme random test. Extreme random test. Sorry. So let's exclude what we can block. Let's exclude extreme random tree rather. Extreme random tree. Block algorithms. Okay, that's it. Let's exclude this. That's what we just need to exclude there for this particular experiment. Then let's, in terms of adding additional focus, let's just focus on large tag. Large tag. Now under focus tag, let's make it none. Under target row, let's make it none. Now let's now look at exist saturation, and by default you have 6, but let's make our hands 3 for this particular one, and this metric to be none. And let's go to concurrence. Under concurrence, let's also change it to allow 6 concurrence experiment. You save it. Then once you are done with that, you now need to go to next. Now we go to validation. Now this is where it validates what you have, and once it validates what you have, it now save it. So let's allow validation to use a k-fold group, and let's allow the number by default, that is 5, and we can now click finish. Now this is where it creates your auto ML. Now your AutoML is created. Now you wait for it, you refresh at interval, it can take some time. Then you can now run this experiment to ensure that you have the right and exploit what you have. So once that is done, I'll quickly go to the one I've created earlier so that we can have a view of that and see how it looks like. This class demo, let me launch it here. I've already created this just as, so let's explore this. Now this is the gentle goat I've created earlier. That's the job. As it showed me the job. Now let's now explore what we have here under the model. Now it gives me all the model I have. Now the model will also give us a refresh of what you have. For example, if I want to see the expiration of my job, it gives me the metrics that which it creates this model, and you can see on it help you to check how your model is faring in terms of pricing, in terms of season and the likes. Now you can see here, it gives me a graph of my data in terms of bar. So I will know how many people have registered for my bike. You know, in terms of bike retailing, it's possible you create an environment where people register before they can use your bike. And you also gave me how many people have actually come to look at the bike from the data, just want to look at it and check what is happening and rent it. Now, there are some people that they are casual. They call them window shoppers. So under it, I have 4.39 people. Then under instant people that came and actually looked at my bike. So this also helped me to check. So let's go back to the model. Let's explore more. Now, this exploration helps you to see what you have and how your. So let's go back to the job. And under the job, you look at the model. Under the model, look at each what you want. So let's look at another interesting one that we can use to check. So let's look at the standard job here. Let's look at the metrics. You can see all the metrics used in terms of variance, the forecast table, and you can actually also manipulate. You can predict. You can actually also get to know about the root score if you want. Now, this also gives you additional graph. You can see here, tells you in terms of the forecast, the prediction, how true it is across the seasons that you rent your, and also give you the time and the average score in terms of people that come to look at your. You can also tabulate it if you don't want to chart. It gives you the table. You can see each of it in tabular form, and you can also make decision. Now, the essence of this model, after you are sure of it, you can now deploy it. Once you deploy it, it now goes into your environment to be consumed. Now, one thing you have to understand, once you have deployed this, you need to clean your resources, especially so that it cannot take all your resources and you can easily use it in future. I'm talking of the subscription you have. So this brings us to, before we go, let's just go back to the other class we created, 2, and this is the launch. It's still running. Now, it takes some time because it will run the data, create each output. You can see it's creating the apple. It's running the data. It creates the best model. It tells me how to normalize it. Now, under this, if you go to the model it's creating, you can see different model is creating in terms of average, in terms of the naiveness. This algorithm, these are 5 algorithms it has created. Season average. Let's look at season average. I don't know whether it has created it. And because that's one essence of what we want to look at this. Then let's look at the metrics. Now it's still populating it. Now it tells me a prediction. You can see in terms of the season. Now this second experiment, I am trying to predict. You can see each of the project automate the actual. This is the actual, the blue one. This is the prediction. This is the prediction. So in terms of prediction, we see that we have more in December. More people renting it. And you can tell from this model, why did it get more in December? Because in December, we have more people that are on holiday season. They want to ride their bike, especially in Africa. We have a very good harmattan and a very sunny season. And that can enable them to have a good playground. Now, it might not be feasible for people in Europe, where December is snow, where you have snow. People might be indoor. Now, each of this season, this model I created has enabled me to see how I can actualize my sale, especially in terms of trying to sell and the rest. So let's move back to our demo, and I will just conclude this section by I don't know if there's any summarizing this. Now, in essence of this particular talk, we look at ways by which you can create machine learning model, injecting those data, and we differentiate how automation came in. And because of the stress, time consumption, a system needs to be created that is sequentially in process and allow the model to be created, its generation to be ensured, their parameters to be easily manipulated to ensure we have variable output from 10% to 50%. And each of these things, when you do it manually, takes a lot of time. When you automate the system, it ensures. And for this particular lab, we look at how to predict bike rentage by season. And from our model, we can see that December is more likely for African environment to have more of those of their bike rented because of this holiday season, the time we have good weather, but that might not be applicable to countries like Europe or US where you have enough sun. So I'll be rounding up there. I don't know if there's any question. If there's no question, then I'll call it a day. Thank you for being with me, and I will be with you right here anytime you want me to be. Thank you, and God bless you.